Hey guys, before we start today's podcast, I just want you to know that this is going to be 3 parts while I interview Gabe Brown. He did not give me a time limit. He said, however long you want, Mary Jo. So we went however long we had to. So we are dividing this into 3 parts because we went an hour and 45 minutes and people probably just don't want to listen to an hour and 45 minutes all at once. So this is going to be episode 1 with Gabe Brown. So enjoy the podcast. Hello, and welcome back to today's podcast. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate you, all of you that are binge listening. I love it. Thank you. And thank you for coming back again. Now today, I know, I've been talking about this for 3 days before I interviewed Gabe, so I am sure you are all excited that I have Gabe Brown here today. And we are not going to talk about everything else that Gabe has talked about on other people's podcasts. Because if you want to know Gabe's history, yeah, just go listen. Go to your little podcast app and just search Gabe Brown, and you will find everything that you need to know about Gabe's history. I want meat and potatoes about regenerative agriculture. So for those of you that don't know, because some of you that I talk to do not know about regenerative agriculture, that is, Gabe can correct me if I'm wrong, but regenerative agriculture is not organic farming. This I've learned. So it is not organic farming. I think of regenerative agriculture as a way to make a profit farming. And you guys hear me talk about that all the time. It's all about cash flow. If you aren't cash flowing, you're not making a profit and you're not farming. And so that is what I want to talk about because so many people follow Gabe. So many people follow Understanding Ag, and Gabe is one of the co-founders of that. So we are going to get into meat and potatoes today. Thank you, Gabe, for taking the time to visit with us.
It's a pleasure to be with you,
Even
Mary
though
Jo.
many of you know, because I talk about it all the time, that Gabe is a neighbor. Like, we had to actually drive 2 hours away to meet Gabe in person, and he lives about 3 minutes away from me. So
Yeah, right.
We never see
True
him
story.
because he's always gone working. So I'm glad that you took the time today. All right. Can you explain just in your words, not my words, what is the difference between regenerative versus organic? Because I feel like a lot of people get those two things, they're lumping them together.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I tell people that it doesn't matter what you call it. It's just a name. Okay. Organic agriculture, yes, has a certain definition. Organic agriculture, though, may or may not be regenerative. And I tell people all the time that I'm very fortunate. I travel extensively all over the world. I'm on hundreds of farms every year, ranches, and I've never, ever been on a single one, including my own, that's not degraded. We're all farming and ranching degraded resources. So we need to be regenerative in order to get the health of our soils and our ecosystems back to where we give the opportunity for future generations to be sustainable. You know, you hear people talking about sustainable all the time, and I go, why in the world would I want to sustain a degraded resource? That makes no sense. So the first thing we have to understand, the difference between organic and regenerative. If you're organic farming, you're meeting certain protocols. You're not using these synthetics. That's good. That's good. But it may not be regenerative because if you're using excessive tillage, you're releasing carbon into the atmosphere. You're degrading your soil resource. So there's a big difference between the two.
There's a big difference between Mary Jo's regenerative and what Gabe's regenerative is. I'm looking at the profit of it, but that absolutely makes sense when you start looking at the soil portion of it. I just see the numbers.
Where does the where?
Right.
What,
And I would say probably 80% of my clients right now do some sort of regenerative agriculture. And I see the profit side of that. And I can just, like, it's night and day different between a traditional farming operation and a regenerative operation. And the smaller scale farmers who are doing regenerative are making a major profit compared to traditional farmers of the same size.
Yes, work by Dr. Jonathan Lundgren at Ecdysis Foundation found that regenerative farms and ranches had a 78% greater return as compared to conventional or organic farms and ranches. 78% is
That's
pretty
huge.
good. Pretty good.
Is that now? Do you have operations that are large in scale? Like, or do you work with those operations that are 3,000 plus acres?
Oh, by far the vast majority are larger than that. So currently, last time we added it up, Understanding Ag is actively consulting on well over 32 million acres across North America and in England. And the size of our clients, our smallest client is about a quarter of an acre. Our largest client is well over 2 million acres. And we have a lot of clients in the 500,000 to a million acre range.
That is so, because this
doesn't
is what
matter.
I hear. I'm too big, I can't do it. Right? So
we can do it anywhere.
Okay, let's address the big. This isn't where I was planning on going right away, but we're gonna, because we're here. Let's address the bigger farmers, your 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 acre farmers. How do they get started? Mm-hmm. I think so many of them, like Farming Without the Bank, they think, oh my God, I can't have my $3 million loan. So Mary Jo, that doesn't work. I think that they feel the same way. I can't farm 5,000 acres regenerative overnight. Can they? How do they start?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's an excellent question. And what has made our business so successful and increased in size so quickly is the fact we're very good at taking our clients where they're at. You know, every one of us as individuals has a different aversion to risk. Okay, I've worked with clients who they're going to try it on 5 acres behind the hill where no one else can see. And then I've had other clients, no, I'm going to do it I had one client, 8,000 acres of cropland first year. Yep, makes sense. Let's just do it. You know, but it all depends on the individual, and you have to take them where they're at. You know, every farm ranch has a different context. We have a different ecological context. We have a different financial context, different family context. You have to take those things into account, take them where they're at, and then move them down the path according to their aversion to risk. And what they find very quickly is that regenerative agriculture actually gives you much more resiliency. And because of that, it's really not a risk. I tell people this isn't rocket science. It's really pretty simple what we do. It's simply following time-tested ecological principles. And in so doing, you're going to increase profitability.
So if I am a large operation, and it is, we'll get into this too, the fact that it is very overwhelming to look at regen and go, oh, I'm going to do that because I have a million questions on how to start. But sticking back with these large farmers, if they want to do 8,000 acres right away, if they want to do 10,000 acres right away, 3,000, whatever, I am going to guess here and say their best option is to pay the consulting fee to have Gabe come out, because the overwhelming piece is I don't know where to start, but I'm too cheap to pay the consulting fee, so I just won't do it. Is that a true statement?
Well, let me give you this example. I had a new client in Idaho, just over 500,000 acres. Okay. The first year, I saved him $557,000 on his fertility. The first year. Okay, what was my fee for doing that? About $6,000. That's pretty good return on investment. I'd take that any day. But the reason there's this hesitation on many people, you don't know what you don't know. It's hard to implement something you don't know. And I tell people, I've got a couple college degrees. Never, ever once in college, in any of my soils classes or ecology classes, did they teach me how a soil aggregate is formed. They didn't teach me about the nutrient cycle, the energy cycle, the water cycle. We can't expect farmers to know this, but where it starts with us is it's an education process. Farmers are very good at producing, but they need to learn how do these ecosystems function, and then we work with them. Let me give you this example. So we've taken soil samples on over 32 million acres. Now, I'm sure every farmer listening who does soil testing will say that, well, they need to apply so much nitrogen, so much phosphorus, so much potassium. How many of those 32 million acres did we test were short in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium? The answer is 0. We've never, ever tested a single acre that doesn't have plenty of nutrients. Well, then why are the agronomists telling them to apply nutrients? Because they're only looking at the inorganic fraction. They're not looking at the organic fraction. And then, okay, how do we get that organic fraction available? You have to have the biology. And the agronomist isn't telling you that. So what we do that's different is we do proper soil testing that looks at all the nutrients in the soil and then also looks at the biology. How much biology do you have? And then we start them on the path of proliferating the biology on their farms and ranches to release the nutrients that are already there. And if they don't think that's possible, answer this question. Okay, who was applying synthetic fertilizer 500 years ago? How were these prairie soils formed? Well, the answer is they're formed from the energy cycle, water cycle, nutrient cycle. And to think that we have to apply copious amounts of those things, it's just false. Now, I'm not sitting here saying you can remove all your fertilizer inputs. No, you can't do that until you get a healthy functioning soil.
So that's going to take some time.
On my ranch, I haven't used...
So if I have a big operation,
go ahead.
That is going to take some time. I can't come in there and say, hey, Gabe, help me with this. And I'm going to have 5,000 acres overnight. That is exactly where it needs to be.
No, and you never get there. It's a journey, you know. It takes time. I've been on this path well over 25 years, and I still don't have our soils where I want them to be. But the fact of the matter is what we're finding with our clients, literally 85% of them are over-applying nutrients. They're over-applying way too much. And through proper soil testing, we're going to save them money, especially look at input prices today. That's how we start them down the path. We increase their profitability. In most cases, in year one, we can start increasing profitability with proper soil testing. And then we guide them down the path.
What happens, I'm a farmer. I come in and I do whatever it is you can tell me to do. But what is my crop production at that point? Am I making money off of that crop? Now I know it's not bushels that matter. It's the profit that matters. So are we going to see, are we going to have a shock that our bushels per acre are down, but we shouldn't care because our profit is up, correct? Because we didn't have all the inputs?
Most of our clients do not see any reduction in yield. They don't. What we're doing is we're keeping them from the over-application. Realize most agronomists, what are they in the business to do? Sell, right? They sell things. So they're going to recommend you buy something. We don't sell anything except our knowledge. And so we're not tempted to, oh, let's have him or her purchase a little more. No, we won't do that. So that over application is where you save money initially. And then as your biology increases in your soil, we're going to slowly, methodically cut you back on these inputs. Let me give you this example. I have a young couple just north of Minot, North Dakota. This is their 4th crop year. They've been working with me, 4,800 acres of cropland, no livestock integration. They have reduced their synthetic fertility over 50%. They've reduced their fungicides 100%, their insecticides 100%. Last year, in a D3 drought, they had their most profitable year ever without factoring in crop insurance. Okay? So if that doesn't tell you what it can, the positive impact financially, I don't know what will.
So that then leads me to a question that I asked people what they had for questions, and that was one of the questions. And that's the same question my husband has. How do you, well, I guess he doesn't have this particular question because we have cows. We have cows grazing our stuff. But what is how do I implement regenerative agriculture if I don't have cattle to graze that ground?
Over a third of our clients are strict crop farmers only, no livestock. Okay? And what I tell people is we can guide you down the same path. The case study I just shared with you, that young couple has no livestock. They rent most of the land. There's no fences, no water. They're not going to have livestock. That's fine. We can still advance soil health, ecosystem function. We can certainly increase their profitability. And we've proven we've been able to do that. The fact of the matter is their soil will never get to the point that it could if you integrated livestock. But so be it. That's their choice. You know, don't think that when you hear regenerative agriculture, you have to do everything Gabe Brown does. No, don't do what I do. Do what fits your context.
So how do you, here's another question we had is, how do I convince or get a landowner to understand that I want to rent that ground, but I want to do regenerative on it and I don't want to do traditional farming?
Mm-hmm. And I put it this way. Every year we get landowners coming to us asking us to farm their land because they see what we've been able to do. And I tell people, you know, I used to wake up every morning trying to decide what I was going to kill that day. A weed, a pest, a fungal disease. I was going to kill something. Now I wake up every morning, how do I get more life on my ranch? And landowners see that. They see the life. They see the diverse cover crops. You know, that's a good feeling. You know, they don't have water sitting on their fields. It infiltrates quickly. They don't have the wind erosion, you know, the soil erosion from wind or water. And so they want that. Now, some landlords, they're only interested in the money, okay? That's all they're interested in. If you come to me and it's all about getting the most rent out of me, I'm not going to work with you. You know, Gabe Brown is not addicted to work. I don't need to farm more land, okay? I don't. We're profitable enough. So they have to have some skin in the game too. We treat our landlords very, very well. We treat their land as every bit as well as we treat our own. But by doing that, though, we expect them to be fair to us, you know? And sometimes you got to weed through landowners also.
Yeah.
You know, I've started farming some land a couple of times for people, and they just had no interest in regenerative agriculture. That's fine. I don't need to rent your land. I moved on. And that's what I tell people. Now, how do you, if you have a landowner currently and you would like to use regenerative practices on their land, and maybe it's a crop share basis or that, you need to go have that conversation. And you need to explain to them what you're doing. But I tell you, one of the first things you do is you get a cover crop growing somewhere near their farmhouse where the missus can look out and see sunflowers and all these flowering species. She's going to make the decision for him in this case and say, hey, we want more of that. So that's a good thing.
Do we have a concern, like if we're going to go talk to a landowner, is that landowner's main concern that I'm going to have weeds growing because you're not spraying? And you are not anti-spray by any stretch of the imagination. But I guess I don't understand why there would even be a concern.
Well, realize most people, they look out over what many consider a pristine, weed-free field. They think that's good. But then you look at the lack of biodiversity in that field. You look at the lack of water infiltration, the lack of aggregation, the lack of nutrient cycling, and realize it's not good. Okay, weeds are nature's healers. Now, don't get me wrong. We don't want a field full of weeds. But we have to realize they're trying to tell us something. Besides, if an animal will eat it, it's not a weed, it's a forage, and our cows will eat almost anything. There's nothing that they won't consume. Many people don't realize the importance of nutrient cycling. And let me use this as an example. So if you have a field that gets a lot of dandelions in it, well, what's that telling you? Most farmers, I got dandelions, I got to go spray. Gabe Brown looks at that and says, no, you're short of calcium. Those dandelions are there to cycle calcium. Okay? There's some really good books out there, Weeds, Guardians of the Soil, Weeds, What They Tell Us. We've lost that wisdom in agriculture, and we just look at it as a problem. It's just like a pest insect. Most farmers see a pest insect and, I got to go spray an insecticide. Well, for every insect species that's a pest, there's 1,700 that are beneficial. Why not just provide the home and habitat for the beneficials and they'll eat the pest? We need a few of the pests to feed the beneficials. I never have to worry about spraying an insecticide because we have the predator insects that'll take care of any pests. We've just got this convoluted mindset in agriculture that it's all about killing. And that's not how it should be. So getting back to the weeds, first of all, you have to define a weed to me. Okay? Is soybean a weed? No. Is soybeans grown in corn a weed? You're going to say yes. Well, if that's the case, then why wasn't it a weed when it was alone? It's ridiculous.
But I guess from our aspect, a weed, just growing up in traditional agriculture, right? A weed is something that just spreads, like the seed, like the Canadian thistle in our yard, Gabe. It just spreads and it just spreads and it just spreads. And it's like, what good is my Canadian thistle? Can we answer that question tonight?
Okay. Yep, I sure can. Ask yourself, why is the Canadian thistle there? Okay. Oftentimes, look, where do you see Canadian thistle? Oftentimes it's in CRP, it's in a road ditch that isn't grazed, and what it is, you get a buildup of too much thatch or residue, and that thistle is there to cycle nutrients to help break down that residue. Now, our animals readily eat Canada thistle, and all you have to do is go in there with higher stock density, they trample it down, open up the canopy, sunlight gets in, they're breaking that thatch layer, which is why the Canada thistle's there. Canada thistle's gone in no time. So it's a non-issue.
That is funny. So most people know that Gabe's son, Paul, grazes all of our ground. And yes, they are great to work with. And I will attest to that. Like, we bought our land. I put a post on Facebook, and within 30 minutes, I had 3 people asking to graze our ground. And I'm like, that's kind of rude. And so I just was like, no, and no. And then I reached out to Paul because we were friends on Facebook. I reached out to Paul. I'm like, hey, new neighbor. And so then he actually asked, like, we had some conversation and he asked, and he was very nice about it. He didn't like bombard me the second that we talked and wanting to have access to land. But we had all kinds of thistle around our dam. And when the first year so Paul came in and grazed it, and then this year there's hardly any thistle. Is that because the cows were there?
Mm-hmm. Remember what I said earlier, okay? The thistles are there to cycle nutrients because you have too much thatch built up. Well, I know for a fact that land hadn't been grazed in at least 5 years previous to you buying it. So you had all that residue building up over the years. The thistle came to help cycle nutrients in order to start breaking that residue down. Paul brought the cows in, higher stock density. They trampled that residue, got it down on the soil to where the biology could consume it. There's no reason for thistles to show up anymore. And I was just by your place with a group on a tour yesterday, and I happen to know right now you have more grass there than most people have had all year, right? More forage. It doesn't even look like it was grazed yet. It was grazed this spring.
We're wondering why Paul's not cutting it for hay. But the fact that, like, we went up to that pond the other day, and I'm like, this has got to be because of the cows. And Scott just wasn't sure. Is it because of the cows? Is it because he went up with the tractor the year before and broke it all down? But we do not have the thistle that, like, we had a massive thistle issue, and we do not have that. And we've only had cows graze twice now.
Yep. But when Paul grazes there, it's high stock density. So they're trampling all that thistle down, dung and urine, so nutrient cycling. There's no reason for the thistle anymore because you've alleviated the problem with the cattle.
I'm excited to see what year
thistles are
about, because then we might not have any thistle.
Yeah. And realize that seed bank will always be there. You're never going to get rid of all those thistle seeds. But that's not a bad thing, because if you ever have a problem again, they're going to be there to help solve that issue. So it's okay.
That makes me feel better, because I have about had it, especially like in the yard. We don't graze the yard, and so I'm like, I don't care if they're in the field so much, but in the yard, come on, like they're just it was overrun. So
but the fact of the matter, in the yard, it's pretty easy to take care of. If you cut thistle and weaken that root system, they'll die.
So tell me, this is the biggest thing, and it's been a challenge for Scott. It's been a challenge for all the clients that I talk to. Where do you get started? Where do you go for the information? How do you know who to trust?
Mm-hmm. Yep. You have to educate yourself. I tell people one of my real strengths I have is that I grew up in town. I wasn't from a farmer ranch, so I didn't have these preconceived notions. So everything to me is interesting, and I'll wade through it and decide if it's something I want to try on our ranch or not. But you have to learn. First thing you have to learn is, how is a soil aggregate built? Most farmers have no idea what a soil aggregate is. The soil aggregate is built by the glues of biology and mycorrhizal fungi, and it'll only last about 4 weeks, and then new ones need to be built. Without soil aggregates, your soil becomes very collapsed. And realize that biology lives in and on thin films of water between the pore spaces of the soil aggregates. Well, most farmers don't even understand that. Today, I had a group of nearly 30 ag educators here touring the ranch. And being like I always am, I take them to the neighbors, and I showed them 10 plus years no-till that was as hard as a rock. See, just because you're no-till doesn't mean it's healthy soil. But they had a poor crop rotation, and they were not building soil aggregates. So the soil was collapsed. They can't infiltrate water, no nutrient cycling. The roots on that wheat crop were literally less than 3 to 4 inches into the soil. Then we just walk across the road, go into mine, and you know, we have wheat roots going down nearly 2 feet in some cases, and well aggregated soil. And the difference is simply management. So you have to educate yourself. So on our Understanding Ag website, we have a lot of resource material that's free of charge, webinars and you know, different resource materials. You need to educate yourself. We also have a nonprofit called Soil Health Academy, where we put on 3-day intensive workshops for farmers and ranchers as to the regenerative practices. And as a matter of fact, we're going to be having one on my ranch here the end of August here. Unfortunately, it sold out very, very quickly, but go attend one of those academies and learn. You know, it amazes me how little farmers and ranchers are willing to invest in their own education. You know, it's often it happens where a farmer or rancher attends our academy and they literally save tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars the very first year. Okay. If that isn't worth 3 days of your time, I don't know what is. Yeah. You know, right? So you got to learn and educate yourself.
It's so, like, I asked Scott, I said, what are your questions? And he said, well, I've listened to and I have multiple clients, right? I've listened to everything Gabe has said. I've read the book. I've done everything. My question now is, once we have the soil sample, because obviously we have to start with the soil sample. Once we have the soil sample, how do I know what to plant and where do I get the seeds?
Yep. So first thing, proper soil testing. There's a couple of tests we recommend. The Haney test, Hanay, a PLF8 test, that stands for phospholipid fatty acid. And then we also do a third test, TND, total nutrient digestion, just to show you have plenty of nutrients. We send them to only one lab, Regen Ag Lab in Nebraska. The reason we do that is we're on such broad acres, we have to test the labs also. And believe it or not, we found up to 92% variability in the labs because they're using different technology. And we have just, you know, we're doing thousands of soil samples annually. So we're going to send to the lab we feel most confident in. Once you get those tests, then we'll need some help probably determining and analyzing them and helping guide you through what that tells you. We will gladly have a conversation with you and explain that with you. Then once you get that, then you go and say, okay, what's my crop rotation? Okay. Now, corn and beans is not a crop rotation, okay? All you're doing is alternating crops, but it's really not a crop rotation. Corn and soybeans will degrade soil. And I don't care what anybody says. I talk to people in the I-states all the time. They think they have great soil. Well, I'm sorry, their soil is extremely degraded. It's every bit as degraded as ours here in the Northern Plains. And so you have to at times realize that you may have to diversify your crop rotation, okay? Even though you just want to plant corn and beans, you may have to add wheat to the rotation or some other small grain in order to cycle more carbon and to allow you the window of time to plant a cover crop. And don't think of a cover crop as just there to hold the soil. What you're really trying to do is cycle solar energy, it's free, and feed soil biology. And that's what it's about. Now, which cover crop species you use, that we can help you with. That depends on your resource concern. What crop are you following with? What was your herbicides used the year before? Are you going to graze livestock or not? Do you need to cycle nutrients? we help guide people down that path as to which cover crops to use that will best fit their resource concerns, address those, and allow for profitable crop production the following year. Now, I'd like to talk just a second here about how many people say, well, I can't plant a cover crop. That costs money. Well, I'm sorry, you can't afford not to. And I'll use this to prove the point. Above every surface acre of earth, there's 32,000 tons of atmospheric nitrogen. Why would any farmer want to go write a check for synthetic nitrogen when all I have to do is grow some legumes and cycle that nitrogen? Okay, and then you have to have grasses grown with those legumes in order to capture that nitrogen. But it's just foolish, you know. I haven't used 1 pound of synthetic nitrogen since 2007, and yet my proven corn yield's 127 bushels an acre. Now, for Burleigh County, North Dakota, that's higher than county average, with zero nitrogen added, right? People, this isn't rocket science. It's simply working with nature.
Thank you guys for being here. You know the drill. If you have comments, concerns, questions, let me know. MaryJo@withoutthebank.com. If you have not gotten my book, Farming Without the Bank, what are you waiting for? I am not going to bite. You do read, because if you didn't read, you probably would not have found me. So definitely go to farmingwithoutthebank.com, grab the book, and be on the lookout. If you are in the Cody, Wyoming area, I am going to be in Cody. So be on the lookout for tickets, because you can go to farmingwithoutthebank.com/events and you will be able to get your ticket for Cody there. It's a $25 ticket. It is not expensive. I just want to be able to cover a rental of a room. That is it. So please make sure that you get your tickets. We will be there September 14th. And it will be an evening presentation. I'm just not sure where we are having it yet, because we are still looking for a location. So make sure, if you want to you want to see me live and you are around the Cody area, that you get your ticket. All right, guys, thanks. And you have a fantastic rest of your day.